Check WNST Facebook channel. I'm dimming the lights here because I'm going old school. If I had a lava lamp, I'd put that up. I met this guy when I was a kid, and he was a kid. I was a kid trying to be a hockey writer and trying to figure out my way through life at the Baltimore Evening Sun. He was trying to figure out his way into the National Hockey League as a goalie. Found his way into the league as the director of hockey operations for the Washington Capitals at the turn of the century for about 8 seasons. He is up in Ottawa in exile now doing a real man's job. Sports radio at TSN 1200 The Drive in Ottawa, Canada. I have been threatening to sleep on his couch and come to a hockey game in Ottawa. I have other friends up there. Simmer, it hasn't worked out. I mean, one of these years we're going to meet in the playoffs or something's going to happen, and I'm going to wind up having breakfast in your kitchen and bringing some good coffee in there, put my chef hat on. But for now, the Capitals are in the Stanley Cup Finals, and I'm opening up the Rolodex here for everybody that knows more about hockey than me, and you're one of those guys. And, dude, this is exciting, as you know, and I know your lineage and hair. I ran into Ole Kolzig in the elevator after the game, so there was a Skipjacks moment, and you played for the Skipjacks and Trotzy and all that stuff. This is... You know, when you get to be later in life like you and I at this point, you look around and see Barry Trotz in the Stanley Cup Finals, it gets your attention, doesn't it?
It really does. You go back to the Skipjacks, and boy, he was an assistant coach under Robbie Laird. We had good old Kenny Albert as the broadcaster. They had a room on the road, small world, and still friends with everybody this much further. And back in 1998 with the Caps, we ended up going to the finals. It was kind of a miracle run and beating Boston to Ottawa to Buffalo, got swept by Detroit. But we really didn't have that good of a team. Ole stood on his head. We got some timely scoring, got lucky, and by the time we got to the finals, I realized, boy, Detroit's in a different class. This feels different, and for a fan base in the Ovechkin era that has been incredibly loyal, has had so much heartache at the hands of those darn Pittsburgh Penguins, this almost feels like the 04 Red Sox. If you're going to win it and win the Stanley Cup, you might as well go right through Pittsburgh like the Red Sox went through the Yankees. And right now, I like their chances in a Stanley Cup final. So this is great for the Caps, great for Barry, and great for people that have cheered for this franchise for a long, long time.
Well, I mean, you were a part of building it the first time around, and then Ovechkin comes into this, and obviously under George McPhee, and, you look up, and here McPhee looks like he's drafted almost every player in the series. What a turn of events. What a story for expansion and for hockey, and I know it must burn your airwaves up as well as burn the backsides of a lot of Canadian people that Vegas was given a team and made good enough to do this, but I think this is very much an anomaly, and for the people outside of hockey, it's not like they loaded up the Vegas Stars with a team full of Ovechkins. They had a nice team that probably should have been sort of a fair to middling team. Certainly wasn't going to be the Capitals of expansion in 1973, trying to get 7 or 8 wins. They should have won 20 or 30 games, but they didn't. And that really shows what George McPhee's about, putting the team together, right?
No, you're absolutely right. I don't know in sports if there's a parallel. And for George, certainly bitterness in leaving Washington. You're so close. You do so many good things. Couldn't happen in the playoffs. You leave. And of all the things you think when you take over an expansion team, gosh, if Washington wins the cup, and it's probably 5 years before I build one. But when you look at the expansion draft, hockey's just better now, Nestor. That's the flat-out fact of previous expansions. You also had one team coming in. You also had the majority of the better players that Vegas picked up were actually in trades. I don't have any issue with the process. They paid $500 million. They've done a hell of a job, and they have a very competitive team. Are they overachieving a tad? Yes. They may play in the weakest division in hockey right now in the Pacific. So, hey, I don't know if they're going to take a run to a Stanley Cup next year, but don't look for them to go away. And for George McPhee, pretty amazing, and it must be incredibly mixed emotions, but for him as well. If you were ever going to build an expansion team, get to a Stanley Cup and win your first one, it'd be pretty cool if you did against the Washington Capitals. But certainly his prints are all over both of these teams.
Well, I mean, you tried to do this. You tried to build a Stanley Cup champion. Some thoughts about the modern version of the Caps and what Trotz has done here. And, I wouldn't go so far as to say if you were a general manager right now, Barry Trotz is the kind of guy you want to hire to coach your hockey team, especially if you have a bunch of veterans. And I don't know that he's been given enough credit because they've been bounced out when they've been bounced out. But, boy, I think he's certainly going to get it if Ovechkin's skating the cup around in Game 6 down in D.C.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, unfortunately for Barry, you don't meet a better person. I say to people between he and Bruce Boudreau, I can't explain it. I can't explain it for the late Brian Murray. Those are three of the better coaches in the last 25 years. None of them had any real playoff success. Barry couldn't get it done in Nashville. Now he's gotten it done in Washington. I don't know why this happens, but it certainly doesn't mean you're a bad coach. And when you also look at the circumstance of not having a contract, I don't know what the relationship is with Brian McClellan. I don't even know if he'll be back. Talking to people, it doesn't sound like he will. Now, they go to a finals, they win. Does that change? But you have to be cheering for him under a very strange circumstance where ultimately he could win his first Stanley Cup and walk out the door. The question would be if he walked out, there are no jobs available right now. What would he end up doing? But for the here and now, for Barry and his family and everybody, just focusing on, and you know how he is. All the players love him. They know what he's all about. They know that he's the real deal as a person, and they've always got his back, and I'm sure they'd love to win a cup with him.
All right, so what were you jibber-jabbing around when things went bad with Grubauer? And I had Dougie McLean on it. Doug said I would have pulled Grubauer after one. I would have gone into game two. All the changes. You were a goalie. You ran teams. It's a nice problem to have two guys you think you can win the cup with. I'm not shocked that Hopi wound up back in. I'm not shocked that Hopi has led them to the Stanley Cup Finals. That's why they paid them the money to begin with. Not to say that Grubauer couldn't have done this, but Barry took on a lot of heat when he started Grubauer in Game 1 in Columbus.
Well, you know what? When you make these decisions, you make it with the goaltending coach, Mitch Koren. You probably talked to Ole Kolzig. It's a group decision. For whatever reason, they decided to start Grubauer in the series, which I understood for Game 1. Was a little bit strange for Game 2, possibly. Was it designed to piss off Holtby and get him refocused? Not a chance. Did it work out that way? Well, it really has. And like I said, it's easy to second-guess in professional sports. There's a lot of thought that goes into the process. And for that particular time, they felt that Grubauer was a better guy. Fortunately, they were able to have the time, get Holtby in there, and they really have not looked back. And he's played his best. He's been a guy. Go back to last year against Pittsburgh. They win in Pittsburgh Game 6. It's Marc-Andre Fleury in Game 7 that wins it. He has not had great success either. He's got great numbers in the playoffs, but he hasn't won the big ones. And so far this year, he has absolutely done that, including Game 7 in Tampa.
Yeah, we're kind of familiar with the guy on the other side. I mean, look at all the demons that have been slayed here and the dragons of the past, whether it's Tortorella, whether it's, blowing leads many, many overtimes earlier on. Then you get through the Penguins. Then you get a lead. You win the first two and then can't get out of your own way. And it's the same old Capitals going into Game 6 and you're down 3-2. And now at the end of all this, not just McPhee, but Fleury. Beating Fleury in a 7-game series is something Alex Ovechkin hasn't done.
Yeah, no, it would be pretty amazing. And again, kind of that criteria to check off all the different boxes if you win it. Hey, do you want a Stanley Cup the easy way? I'll take it anyway. I couldn't care less who's playing. But for the path that you're going down right now, hey, there's no doubt. And the Pittsburgh Penguin curse that had been on the Washington Capitals other than the year we beat them in '94 and other than when they won this year, it just hasn't been right for the franchise. And there's no doubt that anybody from the front office to the players to any fan that's ever cheered just gets an absolutely sick feeling. So would this be the ultimate redemption? To be quite honest with you, I can't think of a better storyline than to go in and play Vegas, play Marc-Andre Fleury, even if it went long and he won a Conn Smythe, although I think it should go to Ovechkin. Who cares? It'll be, Alexander Ovechkin hoisting the Stanley Cup should they win. And my prediction is the Caps will win in 6. So.
Well, this guy turns 50 this year, and I turned 50 this year. We've known each other since I think we were maybe 20 or maybe just below 20. Shawn Simpson.
No, it was 20, yeah exactly. 89, 88, 89.
I was the kid in the locker room just trying to get a good story. He is TSN Simmer out on Twitter and doing sports radio, the important work in life at TSN 1200 The Drive up in Ottawa, and, of course, the one-time director of hockey operations. You talk about directing hockey operations. Certainly Ovechkin, for all the years he's been here, all the promise to get to this point. I mean, there is a feeling that when you have the best player on earth, you're supposed to win. There's never been more of a team game than hockey and playing for each other and all of that. Look, Ovechkin's gone through a drinking era, a fat era, a cultural era. He's got gray hair now. He's gone through marriage. He's gone through a lot of losing. He's gone through a lot of injuries. Really, really incredible years. Some years not so incredible. And then there's been this reawakening of, the Russian machine this year. What a second act and what an act it would be if he's skating that cup around in 10, 12 days.
No, you're right. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think a ton has changed. He's certainly made some adjustments in not turning the puck over, but he's never been the best player on the planet. He's been the best goal scorer. And one of the big problems for a goal scorer is you can only have so much effect on a hockey game. If you don't get the goaltending, it doesn't matter how many goals you score. If you don't have the center ice with the Kuznetsov now and Backstrom, sliding down, it's not going to matter. And that's one of the problems with the sport and the isolation for the style he plays. He's not Sidney Crosby. Centerman has a greater effect on the hockey game on a whole and is able to control things. So for Alexander Ovechkin, I don't think a ton has changed. I think that, hey, what's happening around him, and now he's starting to get some credit. And ultimately, it's always harder for us to come around on the Europeans, especially the Russian-born players. But I think there's just flat out a lot of people now that are really cheering for him and feeling like, you know what, Sidney Crosby, for many reasons, is hated up here in Canada where he's from. And there's a lot of people now that were pulling for him to beat Crosby and now ultimately for Ovi to win a Stanley Cup.
It's funny how you go up and down the ladder with whether you're popular or not. I mean, I can't think of anything Russian that's popular in my country right now, or should be. So, I think, at this point, certainly, I mean, he's been a very pro-Putin guy, too. So you want to play the nationalist card. But on this stage, for what he's brought to the game and what he's brought to the franchise and brought to the area, this would be a bit of a coronation for him. I mean, as well as Backstrom in Sweden, and as well as Braden Holtby and Trotz and anyone else. But he sits at the top of the class. All the rest of these guys, if Backstrom doesn't win, it'll be Ovechkin's fault, kind of, sort of, in the mind of hockey over the next 10 or 20 years when it comes time for him to go into the Hall of Fame. These 2 weeks will define him even more so than any of the rest of these players.
Yeah, you know what? I know there's very few parallels to his career. Unfortunately, a couple of parallels you look at were goal scorers in the past in Washington, Mike Gartner and Peter Bondra. Guys that couldn't get it done in the playoffs, and this will redefine his entire, reputation going forward. A Stanley Cup and everything else he's done, and probably the greatest goaltender in the history of the National Hockey League based on the numbers in comparison to other eras, it will be a conversation that will be completely different versus him not winning. And also I find in the United States where politics is so incredibly intense, there is a clear separation when it comes to your sports team. By the time that person that's Democratic or Republican goes to a Caps game and puts on a red jersey, they could not care less of the nationality of the player or whether they're pro-Putin or not. That factor just blocks right out, and I absolutely love that part of it.
He's Shawn Simpson, TSN Simmer. He's doing it every day up in Ottawa, Canada, where I've got to get up there to TSN 1200. I have his number in the Rolodex, and I'm rolling out all my hockey friends. How about this, man? 103 in Vegas, and we're going to play hockey. How about that?
Yeah, no, I love it. Hey, you know what? And it's low humidity. It's going to be hot, but who cares? And this has been a nice story for the NHL. I was worried when they went to a non-hockey area. If you put a crappy product in, like you've done in other places like Florida and Phoenix and other places, there would have been some real trouble. So this is a real positive, and it makes $650 million for expansion for Seattle feel like a bargain right now. So this has been a great story for the NHL, and I think for the Caps, it's kind of cool rolling into the entertainment capital of the world for the start of the Stanley Cup Final. Almost feels like a Broadway show or a play in Vegas.
I don't have you on as much as I would if I sat here and talked hockey all day, every day, but this is my license this week, right? I mean, Caps in the Stanley Cup Finals, Orioles in last place, and you're usually calling me to talk Blue Jays and Orioles with you up there at TSN 1200 in Ottawa, but for doing all hockey this week, I've been asking my hockey friends the same question. I have been the only guy in Baltimore since you've known me over 30 years to talk consistently about hockey. I'm the only one in the media that loves it here. There's not a huge fan base, as you know, having put on that Skipjack sweater many times, that I will be wearing at Game 1 out in Vegas, as well as Game 2, as well as Game 3. Why do you love hockey still? I mean, not everybody that grew up in Canada that played in the league and got involved. I mean, you could have gone into banking. I know you went to law school. There are a million things you could have done with your life. And, many of your former teammates, the Steve Seftals and those guys that I stay up with out on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook and wherever they've matriculated to. I always think of Tyler Larder and Kent Painter whenever I went up to Prince Edward Island and different, and where the people were from. Guys that were from Vancouver, from Edmonton or Calgary, and their backgrounds. But all these years later, you're still involved, and you still love hockey as much as you ever did, but you were born into it. Here, we're trying to figure it out. This is an incredible growth time for hockey in our area, that if this cup happens, what it will do for kids wanting to play, people wanting to buy tickets, people becoming hockey fans for life. For people like you and I, it's kind of what we've always been into, but I always try to say, why do you love hockey at this point?
Well, I grew up around it, and certainly going to the United States and then playing and going right into a job with Washington, that was part of it. And you understand, hey, it's not a prime thing. It's not even second or third as far as conversation for people, and it's been a long haul. But after working it for so long and transitioning back to Canada 7 years ago to hop into sports radio, and the comfort level here would be similar to someone retiring from the Baltimore Ravens, where if you hopped into a sports station, you're talking predominantly the one sport, and we do talk other sports, but 90% of our conversation ends up being hockey. And so when you have such a comfort level with that, and I've been around it my whole life, hey, it just makes it a whole lot of fun. And Ottawa's my hometown. It's where I grew up. Popularity of the sport's never been greater, and so yeah, I just love it. As far as the Stanley Cup, you think back to what that meant to Philly in the 70s, what it's meant to Pittsburgh, and there's no doubt that would really solidify the Washington franchise. And ultimately, you're only a strong franchise if you have people playing the sport, because you can see Pittsburgh's gone bankrupt twice. You can win all you want, but all of a sudden you have a downturn. If people can't relate, don't know the feeling of putting on the skates and all the other fun things that come with it, that can deteriorate in a hurry. So I think this would be huge for the Washington franchise going forward.
I got off the plane down to Tampa, Simmer. It's 94 degrees. I'm melting. And you walk into that rink, and it's not the Buccaneers. It's not the Rays, where, kids grew up playing baseball in Tampa, Florida. Boy, the Bolts own that place, dude. They own Tampa.
Yeah. They've done a great job. They've had great ownership, and again, a key for them, they've had a great product. Steve Yzerman has done a real nice job. The way to kind of see where you're at is when you have a bit of a downturn or down times, what does it end up looking like? But if you want to honestly look at, Vegas is an example, but from top to bottom, as far as a model franchise and the way it can be run, don't look any further than the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, that's the gold standard, not just for hockey, but really sports, right from the owner all the way down.
Appreciate you, man. I love that I have so many guys like you, in my life 30 years later that want to come on. And finally, it's a bit of a coronation to be able to have all of you on at the same time, just to talk about our love of hockey. And it's a great thing. I mean, especially with, you mentioned franchises on the downside. I'll deal with the Orioles. I'm writing a whole series of Dear Orioles letters later on in June when this is all over with. And after Alex Ovechkin skates the Stanley Cup around at some point here. And I'll circle back. Hey, man, I tried to get to Winnipeg. I mean, I know you're nowhere near Winnipeg, and, Americans all think Canadians are all the same, but, boy, that looked like the place you wanted to go. I mean, I had flights into Minnesota. I was going to drive through North Dakota because I'd never done that. I was so excited about no one's ever been more excited to go to Winnipeg than me. No one's been ever more excited to go to Winnipeg than go to Vegas than me. I'll take Vegas, but Winnipeg would have been nice, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. I like the Vegas story, but for the passion and for the Winnipeg to get their franchise back after moving to Arizona, no, it's been huge. And they've got a building that's not, well, it's the smallest in the National Hockey League, but that, you're in a place when it grabs a hold. And sure, when the Ravens have gone to a Super Bowl or won a Super Bowl, I mean, things grab a hold of not just a few things, not just the arena on a game night. It grabs a hold of the entire series. And that's actually the nice part with DC, and certainly even with Vegas in the first year right now, is that Vegas has got the stage. They're the only professional sports team in town, so this is a nice opportunity for them to really showcase it as well.
I'm going to run wild out there, bet the hard 8 on your honor, and, I'll be back for 5, and if necessary, Game 7. They always put the if necessary in there, and if necessary, we're going to be out there. It's going to be a great couple of weeks of hockey, and you feeling like I should feel confident here, Simmer, or how you feel about
I do.
this?
I can't explain Vegas, and they're a good team. This isn't like when Florida went to the finals with John Van Beesbrook and they hung around and got swept by Colorado Avalanche in 4 straight. They're good, but I still feel like Washington, for everything they've overcome, I feel like with Ovechkin, with Trotzy, Holtby kind of up and down the lineup, it just feels like destiny right now. Now, Vegas is one of the great sports stories of the last 25 years, but I still, as I said, I'm taking the Caps in 6.
It feels like destiny, Shawn Simpson. It feels like destiny that the Capitals will win the Stanley Cup. I don't know that that's ever left your lips, right?
No, never. I think as a Caps fan, there's no doubt even going into a Game 7 in Tampa, I think for some, but I really felt that morning, and Trotzy doing that lap with the team, I thought, hey, you know what, they're going to win tonight. And sure enough, they did, and I have that same confidence going into the final.
Going to get a tear in your eye when Trotzy kisses that cup?
Yeah, it'd be awesome. I can't think of a better person. It'd be great to see Ole Kolzig raise it, and don't know some of the other people, and but be certainly happy for Alexander Ovechkin as well.
I ran into Ole in the elevator, 30 seconds after the game, and I just thought it was so awesome to be, an elevator with 12 people, and one of them happens to be a skipjack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's at my heart right there.
Yeah,
So,
and a super guy too.
Yeah, the best, man. Well, you guys, the goalie group, Byron, all you guys were, Rivnak, you guys were, all easy to talk to back and trying to teach a kid like me a little bit about hockey from the east side.
Yeah,
so,
good times.
30 years later, you still teach me about hockey, Simmer. Appreciate you, my brother. Take care of yourself up there.
All right, brother. Take care. Stay
right, if you see a picture on Facebook with my lips on the Stanley Cup, you'll know it's real.
All right. Cheers, brother.
There he goes. Shawn Simpson, TSN Simmer. The way to find him out on Twitter. The one-time goalie of the Baltimore Skipjacks, as well as the Capitals, as well as running hockey operations. Now does Sports Radio TSN 1200 in Ottawa, Canada, or Ottawa. I don't want to mispronounce or offend the folks up there. I've never been. I hear they're nice people up there. TSN Simmer, Simmer, and you can find Shawn Simpson, who we never called Shawn, we just called him Simmer. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel on Frozen Pond all week from Vegas to D.C. along with Ed Frankovic. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking hockey and Baltimore sports.